A very good morning to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and passionate advocates for climate action. Welcome to day two of the Malaysian Support for the COP30 event, a 10-day virtual journey held in conjunction with the UN Climate Change Conference in Belém, Brazil. Over the next 8 days, we will explore key climate themes from ecosystems and adaptation to finance and the blue economy, highlighting how Malaysia is turning climate ambition into meaningful action. Additionally, you're welcome to visit our website to browse our daily themes. Today's theme, Adaptation and Action, focuses on how innovation, inclusivity, and resilience can help societies and industries respond to the growing impacts of climate change. This session explores how AI is shaping urban resilience, how industries are turning innovation into real-world decarbonization pathways, and how indigenous leadership is guiding just and equitable energy transitions across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Together, they highlight the importance of integrating climate adaptation into corporate strategies, risk management, and supply chains to build a more resilient future. To begin today's program, we'll start with the conversation with the CGM chair, Dr. Gary Theseira, who will share a brief update on the live COP30 proceedings from Belém, Brazil. The latter part of the session, we are pleased to invite Ms. Aznie Rahim, Advisory Council member of the G100 Club for Environment, Climate, Biodiversity and Oceans to join Dr. Gary for this insightful discussion. Their discussion theme, Adapting for Tomorrow, Lessons from COP30 on Resilience and Equity, reflects on global adaptation outcomes and connects international frameworks to Malaysia's priorities in agriculture, infrastructure, and public health. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Gary and Ms. Aznie as they share their insights and reflections to open our day two conversation.
Thank you very much, Arin. A very good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for Climate Governance Malaysia's Support for COP30 Adaptation in Action Day. Our theme, of course, mirroring the themes that are being featured at the Malaysia Pavillion at COP30 in Belém, Brazil. As usual, I'll begin by running through a bit of what's been reported coming out of the COP, and in the second half of the hour, we'll then we're very privileged to have with us is Aznie Rahim to talk about this issue of adaptation, which is extremely broad and oftentimes recognized as not adequately addressed compared to its twin sibling mitigation. The second day of the COP is usually a day of, delegates finding their bearings, getting sort of their feet wet for those who are attending for the first time. But what happens is usually on the weekend preceding the COP, we have the coalitions of developing countries primarily having their coordination meetings in the days running up to the weekend, culminating in the coordination of the largest coalition of developing countries, the Group of 77 and China. The interesting thing about having now the COP presidency being one of those developing countries in one of the major sub-coalitions of the Group of 77 in China, the BRICS, which is of course Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, is that we've so far seen a fairly uneventful COP in terms of how it normally begins. As many of you know, COP can frequently get off to a rough start if at the very outset there is disagreement on the agenda. But after the very inspiring address by Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the Ambassador, Vice Minister for Climate, Energy, Environment, Andre Arana Correo de Lago, actually launched the work of the COP. And after his election as the COP30 president. And this adoption of the agendas happened very, very quickly because it was actually enabled by intensive informal consultations by the president. The meetings went on very late into the night. It's not very surprising. That's something that happens quite frequently as well. But parties found a way forward on 8 proposals for new agenda items by the various parties. And part of these 8 agendas, I believe 4 of them were highly contentious. And the solution there was to let 4 out of the 8 proposals undergo further informal consultations convened by the presidency, and that these consultations would be open to observers. So once again, setting a very important tone. It's very tempting sometimes for negotiators to not want observers present when they are attempting to bring agenda items into the agenda that may prove highly contentious. There's a concern, of course, that there might be repercussions if groups such as NGOs or developing countries, specific coalitions, have very concrete and very real problems with some of these agenda items being brought in. But with this late night work very, very early in the COP, in fact, at the outset, we found a way out of a protracted agenda fight. And the 4 agenda items that will be under consideration then, first of all, the implementation of Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement. Now, this is contentious because it relates to mandatory provision of finance from developed to developing countries. This was a proposal brought forward by the like-minded developing countries. Aside from this proposal, they also brought one forward regarding unilateral trade measures, or UTMs. Of course, these are trade measures that are imposed by countries, usually developed countries, and they could have serious economic repercussions for developing countries. The third item that's going to be under consideration was the item responding to the synthesis report on naturally determined contributions. And this addresses the 1.5 degree ambition, and this was brought forward by the Alliance of Small Island States and AOSIS. So 3 out of the 4 items that are going to be under further consultation brought forward by developing countries. The 4th, brought forward by the EU, proposed by the EU, one called Reporting and Review Pursuant to Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, and this relates to the biennial transparency reports. Some quotes to bring us out of the sort of nitty-gritty of the negotiations. In President Lula's speech, he talked about the need to be committed to the truth. He said, commitment to truth can prove that nothing is impossible. He talked about the climate crisis being a lesson of civility and human greatness. And he made the comparison between the huge amount of resources that's going towards military spending and made the note that it would be much cheaper to put money into climate finance than into war. The president of the COP, Andre Delago, was quoted as saying that climate change is not a threat of the future. It is a tragedy of the present time. And he was, of course, referring to the extreme weather events that have been causing devastation for a great part of the vulnerable population in the world. He referred to COP30 as the COP of truth, in an apparent reference to the Trump administration in the US. He said, in the era of fake news and misinformation, the obscurantists reject not only the evidence of science, but also the progress in multilateralism. He referred to the fact that many developed countries control the algorithms that govern social media, claiming that they sell hatred and spread fear, attack institutions, science, and universities. He said that this is now the moment to defeat denialists, and he said without the Paris Agreement, the world would suffer from catastrophic warming. And this looks like it's going to be, this next quote looks like it's going to be picked up and de facto used as the watchwords for this particular COP. We are moving in the right direction, but at the wrong speed. So he launched a call for action in three parts. The first, he called on countries to abide by their commitments, including by formulating and implementing ambitious NDCs, referring, of course, to those countries who've already submitted their NDCs 3, but also calling for countries who have not submitted their most recent NDCs to do so. In a second call for action, he called for accelerating climate action. In his words, there is a need for overcoming reliance on fossil fuels and stopping deforestation. And he talked about the need for advancing a more robust governance to ensure that words can be translated into deeds. He called on the international community to place people at the core of the climate agenda. And this is something that at CGM we've talked about a lot, that the climate emergency, the climate crisis is not an issue of institutions or countries or structures. It is one of people, and we do need to recognize that. He said that global warming has actually pushed millions of people into poverty. It has a disproportionate effect on the people who are least responsible for causing climate change, and he called for that should be taken into account in adaptation action. He said a fair transition is needed, and he pointed to the need to reduce asymmetries between the global north and the global south. He said the climate emergency is increasing inequality, and that increase in inequality was unacceptable. So apart from that, there were a number of other developments. Work, of course, begun during the first week, the official segment under the subsidiary bodies, the subsidiary body for implementation, SBI 63, and the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice, SubStar 63. The chairs of the subsidiary bodies, Julia Gardner from Australia, the SBI chair, and the SubStar chair, Adonia Iyer of Uganda, orally amended the provisional agendas to include some footnotes, and China and Saudi Arabia requested that the subsidiary body chairs provide a report back on some of these issues regarding the consultations. China also took the floor and stressed that the consideration of the footnote took into account the fact that over the past year, the two international organizations responsible for aviation and maritime sectors had already undertaken extensive discussions. Therefore, it was necessary within the framework of the UNFCCC to also consider these issues. These, of course, referring to emissions from international maritime and shipping. There was also in Julia Gardner's opening remarks, interestingly, a tribute to the crucial role of indigenous peoples as stewards of the land and the value of traditional knowledge and contributions to climate action. So once again, we see a very broad approach being taken in this COP to, first of all, try to remove some of the initial barriers to a smooth adoption of the agenda and a smooth beginning of the work. These are things that will often get in the way of the starting of the COP and seriously impede its momentum. So at the very start, I think very judicious, very wise actions taken by the presidency, going deep into the night to resolve these 8 proposals to amend the agenda, accepting 4 and forwarding for further negotiations, further discussions, but doing so in a very transparent manner, where observers are invited to be in the room during these negotiations, during these talks. Now, moving on to today's theme, adaptation in action. We know that as has been pointed out on numerous occasions, the global north has put a strong focus on mitigation. In the past, they've actually claimed that it's only mitigation that has global benefits. It used to be a frequent mantra among the developed countries that adaptation only has local benefits. But I've pointed out in the past that Malaysia was the country that actually raised the issue in the COP, that when developing countries take adaptation measures, for example, if Vietnam takes adaptation measures to reduce extreme weather impacts on its rice crop, it's not just Vietnam that benefits, it's all those countries that import rice from Vietnam that actually benefit from these adaptation measures. And Malaysia used that point, supported by many developing countries, in fact most developing countries, use that to drive home the point that it's not just mitigation that is deserving of funding support, but importantly adaptation and support for adaptation is actually a very necessary part of addressing climate change, because it's useless to undertake mitigation actions and then have them undermined or completely reversed by extreme weather events and loss and damage due to inadequate amounts of adaptation. So, in fact, Malaysia has gone as far as to suggest that every single mitigation action should include within its program boundaries the adaptation measures needed to ensure that the mitigation outcomes that particular project or program produces are not reversed, undermined, or in any way threatened by the potential for either quick onset extreme weather events or slow onset events. So to help us unpack adaptation this morning, we have with us Ms. Aznie Rahim, whom I've known for a fair bit of time. I will not tell you how long, but Aznie was with the ministry and for a long time associated with the water management division. And she's currently on sabbatical, but she has very, very kindly agreed to join us this morning to talk about adaptation. There are many preconceived notions about what constitutes adaptation, but the idea really is, we need to understand what constitutes an appropriate adaptation measure given a particular situation, which adaptation measures need to be prioritized, whose responsibility is it to implement these measures, and by the way, who should pay for it, and very, very importantly, what does long-term transformative adaptation look like? Ms. Aznie, welcome to the program. You recently concluded a study for Selangor, the Adaptation Center, Malaysia, on water for climate adaptation. would you be willing to share some of your key findings with the audience this morning? What did your study reveal? Aznie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gary. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Do proceed.
So I'd like to thank CGM for having me. At the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate my former colleagues at the ministry on the submission of our third nationally determined contributions. We've been amping up our emissions target. That should be applauded and supported. So the focus on adaptation right now, because when I was in Christchurch presenting that paper for Adaptation Futures, something happened in Selangor. We had, I believe it's like a typhoon,
Yes.
Yeah.
It was actually a tornado.
Tornado.
Typhoon, tornado, yes. Full-blown tornado, not a land spout or a water spout. I confirmed this with the now retired Director General of Meteorology. It was a full-blown tornado, meaning forming from the cloud down as opposed to from the ground up. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So this is concerning because I've been finding it difficult to make sense of climate change and also climate variability to policymakers, to people at state government, and also local council. But then we're moving. It's getting there. So what I would like to share with our audience today is how Selangor and the findings from my study actually discovered. So the greatest climate challenge would be, are we able to withstand another 1 in 100-year flood? So when we zoom into Selangor, and why adaptation starts with local understanding, it's because it's very multi-scalar. It relates to how governance actually responds to impact. So for Selangor, yes, urban flood is a problem, but we've been addressing riverine flood. However, coastal flooding has not been given any focus at all at state, also local level. So drainage has overflowed by rapid urbanization, and then the rivers and its tributaries are overflowed as well. Same time, we're facing sea level rise and storm surges, and also coastal erosion. So, what I also found is that flood loss, it costs more than the state's entire annual budget, as well as the mitigation allocation. So if you can see here, the cumulative loss, December 2021 was one of the big reasons why the loss was so high. But then the allocation for this, it doesn't match to what is required. Urban pressure and economic growth, and also limited space. Geography plays a big role in actually determining how land are being developed. So we found that the coasts are not climate proofed. And if you can see here, there are already 3 areas that are, in need of intervention. High density districts based on the population and also population growth, being Pavillion, Klang, and also Ululangat. But at the same time, future risks would include areas like Sepang, Wailangat, and also Ululangat. So if you can see on the screen, the forest cover is near Banjaran and Titiwangsa. And Selangor has also lost forest cover because of all this urban pressure and economic growth. So it would make more sense for us to shape development nearer to the coast, which is why the coast needs to be made more resilient. And then along the coast, we have agriculture activity and also industrial parks. This is happening because perhaps the overlay of climate risk has not been, analyzed before it was planned. Population growth along the coastal district by 2030, it will reach up to 500,000 people. And then we also have the rice bowl in Sivaprasad and Kuala Selangor, especially like Skin Chen. the most productive rice bowl in Malaysia, much more productive than Kedah. And we are facing direct risk from sea level rise for Pulau Indah, PKFZ, and also SBB. And when supply chains are disrupted, it will also impact inland parts. So different districts have different risks, and this is what we mean by local understanding. Yeah. So when we concentrate on areas that are more exposed, of course, we have to look at the coastal PBTs, coastal municipals. So there are two kinds of risk here with economic risk and also social risk. So if you overlay not only economic importance into adaptation action, but socioeconomic background, you see Klang, it presents the economic risk of Selangor, while Sabak Bernam, due to its poverty rate that's higher than the average national rate, would present social risk. The Department of Irrigation, they take in risk as occurrences based on historical data, not future looking. The current flood defense, if you leave it to the state alone, it's not able to withstand future climate risk, yeah? Because according to Nahrim in the fourth national communication, that still stands, 20.9% of flood extent for Klang and also Selangor River Basin is projected. And in a 1 in 100 year flood scenario, according to a World Bank report launched April 2024, it could cost up to 23% of Malaysia's GDP. And this has not even, considered sea level rise impact. ADB estimated 15% of our GDP. So this could wipe out the most industrious, populous, economically vibrant state in Malaysia. And Selangor's position in Malaysia's economic growth is undeniable. Yeah. And if you look at local level, I present to you Klang. This is the kind of compounding flood risk that we are already seeing. Heavier storms and high tides. According to an MP I spoke to, it's occurring more frequently. And this is related to climate change. Drainage and roads are overwhelmed. River capacity maxed out. Some rivers cannot be deepened because it's physically not feasible. And because of this, risks are likely underestimated. So when we deep dive into what Klang has been doing, we found that aligning land use and also risk maps is so critical. It feels like everybody's working in silo, but then at the same time, those same people are actually sitting at the OSC committee. So we need to find out how do we best address this, because the Klang Municipal Council still plan BAU, and industrial zones are in the exposed zones, for instance, like Pulau Indah, Kappa, and also the ECRL corridor. So all of these are not being looked into. And then part of my PhD research is looking into governance and policy integration. So I took some time to actually draw this. This is what we mean by fragmented governance, yeah? So from the upstream, there's river flooding, right? And this is under the river basin management sphere. And then when you come into the urban areas, there's pluvial flooding, and water will go from upstream into the drainage. And this would fall into municipals like PBTs and also Department of Drainage and also Plan Malaysia. And when water flows to the sea, we need to consider coastal management. And I think this has not been considered properly, especially at national level. This will involve more parties like port authorities because of economic activities, and also other economic activities like Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, and so on. So the amount of projects, allocated could probably be under design. So there's a real risk, and there's a challenge that we need to address now. High cost of depending solely on infrastructure pathway. There are overlaps of jurisdiction, flood works that are sometimes duplicated and missed. This policy and also governance fragmentation. And then, like I mentioned earlier, in the case of Klang, land use and risk are not fully aligned. But this is not specific to Malaysia. Addressing federal, state, and also local level projects, allocation, and needs is something that we really need to look into. I believe that it has to start at project level and also at local level, so that we can actually know how to, detangle all this really complex thing. So we proposed adaptation framework that is designed to close all these gaps. But then, a framework for adaptation requires funding, requires finance. So based on our calculation and estimation, we need about 117.6 billion to continue to be protected. So this is extrapolated from national estimate, and it's about 0.3% of Selangor's GDP yearly. So delaying actions would only make the cost higher. This adaptation framework is developed to protect people, economy, infrastructure, and ecosystem. I do not want to, just talk about science, make sense of science and all that. Science, there's not lack of science or engineering solution. Right now, we have to translate that into what it means for our population and also economy. So for Selangor, these are the thematic pillars for adaptation. And how do we do this? This model of climate resilient development, we need to identify risk, design solutions, and also finance. And the more important part is monitor and evaluate, and also be a bit more flexible to change all these pathways of intervention. So we are going to undertake a vulnerability risk and adaptation assessment soon. Hopefully that can be done in 12 months. And this is the 5-year development timeline from 2025 to 2030. So it starts with the VRA assessment, and then we develop the framework, identify who does what, which projects will be given priority, and also develop the indicator. Developing an indicator is another big and I would say complex thing to do, because an indicator for Selangor might not be suitable for Kelantan, for instance. And we hope that when we have all this, we can establish that financing mechanism. There are a few that can be blended, or invite private sector to participate and pilot all this project implementation by 2028 until 2030. So I'm going to stop there, Doc, if you would like to ask more questions about what's Selangor or my research finding.
Thank you very much, Aznie. This is extremely helpful in terms of trying to frame sort of where we need to begin when we're looking at adaptation. So, of course, just to frame your presentation, right now we're just talking about your study being just in one location, and that's the state of Selangor. And even within the state, we already see that so that's one thing, it's one location. We're also only talking about one threat, and that's flooding. So that the first order of business, I guess, is to contextualize this. That this is only one aspect of adaptation to climate impacts. You've already mentioned that while you were in Christchurch, we actually had, I think, what might be considered the first full-blown verified tornado in the Sijangkang area in this particular state. So we see that we are right now only, as it were, dealing with a small part of the climate impacts. And we're talking about extreme weather events, and you point out quite importantly that for the time being, we're still very much history oriented. We're still sort of using past information, and what that essentially does is it's an attempt to address what's happening now. And in some ways, that seems like treating symptoms as opposed to understanding the root causes of things. Before I go any further, I think it's very, very important to let our listeners know that we actually do have a Q&A. And I'm very, very happy to see that Grace Yap has already, ahead of me, gone in and jumped in and put a question in the Q&A. So I would welcome our listening public to use the Q&A box, as Grace Yap has done. And you can see the question here. Does the adaptation study, or I think, maybe if I might rephrase the question, might this adaptation study be applicable to development in the state of Johor, specifically in the Johor Special Economic Zones? Do you want to handle that question right away?
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't, attempted to study Johor's climate impact. So I would say that a study like this is applicable anywhere. But, we have to contextualize climate impacts according to the location. When we attempt to develop this kind of study for Selangor, we look at the state level first, because we cannot just do something without data, without information, right? And then one of the my big concern is that for Selangor, for instance, I found that Westport has conducted their own climate risk, but it is at that level. Okay, so depending on who wants to carry out the study, for state government, it should be, a bigger study which considers socioeconomic impact. And then for a development area, I think what happened in Selangor is that for the two economic areas near the coastal SABDA, being Sabak Perenam Development Zone, as well as Idris, more on the Sepang, they have not even included climate consideration or risk. Perhaps maybe just flood. Right.
Yeah, and this points to some of the questions that I raised earlier. Who's responsible for what? As a business investing in an industrial park in the state of Selangor or the state of Johor, do I inherently expect that the government has taken on the burden of protecting, as it were, or addressing the risk of floods to this industrial park? Or do I need to incorporate into the design of my buildings measures that might reduce my exposure or my vulnerability to these things? I think these are very serious questions, and as a business owner, one might consider the fact that in spite of what might be going on, as long as I know where I'm planting up, and I'm aware of the potential risk of floods, for example, that I might actually build higher, or I might, not use the ground floor, as it were, for machinery or storage or things like that. So this comes to the question of who is responsible for what. I'm very glad to see that we've got people using the Q&A box. Wai Ho Chu kind of latched on to the 117.6 billion ringgit number. I think it's ringgit, right? Number, and I kind of looked at that too, noting that it was almost 1/4 of the GDP. I think you said 23%, somewhere getting close to 25%, almost 1/4. Wai Ho Chu's question is, given that we need this particular amount to stay protected, what are the kinds of projects that are needed, and what is the timeline for their implementation? So it's a three-part question. What are the projects that are needed? What is the timeline needed for the implementation? And the third part is, has the government allocated the funds for these plans? Now, I understand that you might not have all the answers to these questions, and there might be actually federal allocations that then need to be apportioned out to states. But how would you address this question, Aznie?
Yeah. I'd like to bring your attention back to this slide, right? So we know that we have three kinds of flooding in Selangor. So there's urban flood that requires stormwater and also urban drainage management. And we have riverine flood. This is definitely under Department of Irrigation, or GPS. And there's coastal flood, right? This is the most challenging one. So what are the projects needed? Selangor has actually allocated 300 million for Majlis Bandaraya Shah Alam to address the urban drainage. What is needed before we talk about projects is to understand that the overflowing water comes from upstream as well. So it comes from Kuala Lumpur, right? So, and I was just surprised to learn that our municipal councils actually know what to do. So they know where to implement weir, they know which soccer fields to actually deepen to contain water for 30 minutes. So all we need to do right now, firstly, before we identify projects, is that collect all this implementation that's already going on, as being, it's already in the pipeline, and see and create this pathway map first. So if you ask me what projects are needed, engineers would definitely tell you, I need to deepen the drainage or deepen the rivers and whatnot. But perhaps that's not the whole story. So government allocation, yes, there's allocation, of course, but then the plan is missing, right? So, and if you look at the National Adaptation Plan, the measure is always sectoral based, so which means water sector, agriculture sector, and that kind of approach. But at state level, it's different. And when I look at governance, I begin to think that every state is a sovereign governance on its own. They need to understand the kind of risk that they're facing. So the local action would give understanding to the big picture of what the country needs. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much. There's a related question from anonymous attendee, and the question there is, in your opinion, what would some nature-based solutions look like? And they'd like you to be as specific as you can be, specifically, and they also want to know what the challenges are in adopting nature-based solutions. Now, we're going to assume that this is nature-based solutions to address these particular impacts, floods. So,
yeah. I cannot be specific because we're still looking into this. However, at Selangor, because I'm assisting them, that we're moving the research to uncover how do we integrate NBS. And I see that Lavanya is in the call, and I'm sure that WWF would be perfect to answer this question as well. But then
She was on yesterday, so.
oh yes. Okay. But then I'd like to remind everyone, nature-based is not just planting trees. Sometimes we need to renaturalize our river basin, our river in Selangor. One thing that I was struck to discover in the IRBM Integrated River Basin Management
Basin
reports, that the problem with how we have been addressing flood is by straightening the river, right? So maybe the first thing that we need to do, because we need to address the water, yeah, because planting mangroves, everything take time. So we need to address it like that. So, sharing this with you would give you the idea how complicated it is. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So, you mentioned that the allocation is there, all right? It's a sectoral approach. Unfortunately, maybe perhaps we lack a plan, and the question then that arises is that you mentioned that municipalities and local governments, managers understand what to do. In other words, they have already maybe even earmarked areas where impoundments could be created to direct floodwaters to, so that other areas that might perhaps have more assets might be protected. You also mentioned that they kind of work within their own frameworks, and you've raised this issue of working in isolation before. I hate to use the word silos, but because silos are actually very useful things, for storing grain and cement and things like that. But I think we've given a bit of a bad rap to silos, not their own fault. But working in isolation, I mean. We have the beginnings of some collaboration, but I think that this issue continues. For example, I mean, I might know what's going to impact my municipality the most. I might know how to use any allocations to try to address that. But is there any exchange of information between my municipality and the one next door, or the one upstream, or the one downstream? Because the measures that are implemented there are clearly material to what I would implement here. For example, we have rain in Kuala Lumpur one day, and the measures kick in, the smart tunnel kicks in, we have water moved out of KL into the holding areas, and then these are gradually released to the rivers, and then we send the water on down towards Klang. And what has happened in the past is just when this water is arriving in Klang gets a huge thunderstorm, which dumps an inordinate amount of water in Klang at the precise time that the water from Kuala Lumpur, federal territory, which has now moved onto state territory, obviously, is now, and Klang experiences a level of flooding that they haven't had in the past. So how are we addressing the other issue is that we are being programmed to think of floodwater as inherently bad, but as we know, all water is a finite resource, and adaptation is not only to the one threat of floods, it's to all kinds of threats, which include dry periods and droughts. So, in an attempt to be a little bit more holistic, are there any plans or strategies that on the one hand will help us to integrate what's happening in these individual municipalities, local governments, state governments, with each other, so that things that strategies in the federal territory actually articulate with and integrate with the plans in the state and in municipalities, so that there can be this exchange of information even as we develop the strategies, as we implement the measures, so that we can actually not not end up wasting all of these allocations.
The most obvious.
After we speak about that, maybe we can
Yeah.
go to the next question. Yeah.
Yeah. So the most obvious one would be to have a plan, isn't it? So, and the other one is to basically move the needle of governance. Why? Because governance would ensure that all these individual municipalities are speaking to each other. It should be at the state level. Because water is under state power. That's why my research is on the climate and water policy integration. So, this is where, a lot of people think that policy it doesn't play any big role. But then if you speak to municipal councils, their officers will tell you, saya tak ada punca kuasa. That would tell you why policy is important. Policy should be empowered. Okay, we have a lot of policies, but it's not empowered. That's why there's no implementation. And then governance are not flexible to acknowledge, one, that we are facing a problem. Because we're dealing with power structure here. And, to make sure that one municipal is talking to the other, it would also involve their operational constraint. So that's why empowering and also establishing, like what Seng has done with the Climate Adaptation Center, is there. It's basically to facilitate all this. But I think that we're trying to figure out how do we get power to coordinate. So coordination is important to make sure that we're not just talking about science, but to understand their constraints as well. And we have to also acknowledge that sometimes at municipal level, these operation issues it's not small thing. When we talk to them, for instance, I found that waste management is equally important to address flash flood, because the waste will go into and clog the drains, right? So Klang Municipal said, we need about 40 million ringgit just to have two kinds of bins at household. And do you know how many population there are in Klang? It's more than 1 million. So household maybe about 500,000, sorry. So this would tell you that it's not simple, right? And everything is interconnected. That's why we have to look at climate as not a standalone issue. It is governance issue, so everything has to be holistic. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Grace Yap here with a comment that she's put in the chat rather than in the Q&A, and it is a comment. Studies on climate risks for coastal waters, water or riverside development should be nationwide, as we are more vulnerable from many. We're vulnerable on our many coasts, and flooding is more frequent now than before. Yes, Grace, we're probably inclined to agree with you there, and like I said, the structures that we should put up should actually focus on integrating efforts. So that we can actually synergize what's going on in neighboring states, for example. Just as an example, I happened to message Mr. Anthony Wong yesterday, who manages the Frangipani Resort in Langkawi. We were talking about coastal erosion and techniques for addressing that. And we were comparing the use of geotextiles and gabion, which are these huge steel baskets filled with rocks to try to reduce coastal erosion. We're talking about some of the threats when these bags or geotextiles finally break down. The constant pounding of the surf and the sand actually introduces microplastics into this very sensitive environment, and here we are hoping to attract tourists. So all of these things, I think, are highly material, and they point to the need to have, something as simple as a coastal erosion policy. What materials are acceptable to use? What materials should we discourage from being used in some of these things? We also, by the way, Aznie, have a question from an anonymous attendee. I think it's based on one of your slides. If the pilot projects will only be implemented between 2028 and 2030, how do we implement projects based on evidence collected 3 to 5 years ago? And once again, I think I've alluded to this fact that we are still working on historical data and move forward. We do need to get to that. We have about 5 minutes left before the hour is up. But we do need to take a very serious look at that particular issue. Go ahead, Aznie.
Okay, so one of the thing about adaptation, yes, we need to know the historical data and also the projection, right? Projection will tell you what's going to happen, where it's flooding and everything. But then how do we do it? We have to be flexible. The adaptation is asking you to do two things: flexible and learning from that. So when you are flexible and you're learning, so you have to be dynamic. All these pathways should be identified. It's not just infrastructure, right? So one flood mitigation project will take you a decade, from planning to implementation. So that is fair and all good. We need that, right? But at the same time, there are other things that we can do. For instance, I haven't done analytics enough. And I realized that this is so important. So you have to have a mid-term intervention that requires predictive analytics, and then long-term projection that would require dynamic pathways of moving things. So there's nothing wrong with taking actions now. This is what you call no regret intervention. 3 or 5 years ago, that's all good. But at the same time, we need to be flexible and learning from all of this.
Okay. We've got Fiona sending a message to everyone. Great listening to you. Better waste management process key to addressing flooding. So you talked about bins. You talked about. I have seen these plastic temporary road dividers actually being washed into the roadway, into the traffic when we've had some of these extreme rainfall events. Those are not light. They're supposed to be filled with gravel or water to weigh them down. But if they're not weighed down, they can actually be swept away by flash floods and swept into traffic, which is what often happens. If storms are strong enough to sweep those things away, then pretty much, if you put dustbins on the street, they are going to be swept away as well, and then their contents are going to be added to the flood waters, of course, adding to the obstruction, the blockages of the drainage systems, and so it's a compounding issue which cascades into environmental catastrophe. So you have the physical impact of floods, then you have the environmental catastrophe of surface water contamination with waste materials and all that. So thank you, Fiona, for that point. I think that the idea of planning for the future has to encompass a number of things, like your views on that. First of all, we should treat these shifts in frequency and return period as permanent. People might be thinking, it's we've just had the 1 in 100-year flood. Yes, they're becoming more frequent, so maybe we'll get the next one in 50 years. We have time, but that's not true. The next 1 in 100-year flood might actually happen next week, and simply repairing the damage caused by this flood, and taking some very rudimentary or basic measures really does not address the problem, does it? We need to be thinking about the kinds of discharge that we will need to deal with in 10 years' time, in 50 years' time, but that our plans actually called for them to be implemented, based on a 100-year time frame. So basically, we need to bring forward all of these future plans that we had and get them implemented. Like you mentioned, flexibility, very important, but get them implemented in the right places in a prioritized way to maximize the protection and minimize the loss and damage to people. Obviously, it's first of all people, and then infrastructure. How would you characterize no regrets options in this regard? This need to bring into the present all of these things that originally were part of future plans. Do you see any signs in our governance structures, in our civil service, that actually have a command of this concept of permanent changes and what it means to be adapted to not just flooding, but all of the myriad of impacts of climate change?
Yeah, I think that the most obvious one was our response to December 2021 flood. That is a no regret investment there, 22 billions until 2030. So we've already done that. And another one, a big one, was smart tunnel, right? So that's as obvious and clear as we can get. And I'm actually very proud of what we've done in Malaysia today. We have, for a country, now we are an advanced economy, but we have the foresight to actually take that kind of action, that level of innovation. Right now, it requires us to look beyond just managing flood. It's now a systemic occurrence. So it's a janji yang akan ditepati every time. So another thing that we have to also understand is we are the 8th wettest country in the world. We have lots of rain. So this could be, maybe in another session, an opportunity to how to adapt and change to what we have. Yeah.
Okay, with that, we're out of time, very, very sadly. We'd love to have you on at another time so we can talk more about this. I have run out of time, and it's not fair to our next presenters to deprive them of time. Before I go though, I would like to thank you, the audience, for putting aside your time to be with us this morning. Thank you very much for the questions and the comments. Much appreciated. A shout out to all the CGM people working in the background who are helping us bring this to you. Once again, a big thank you, Aznie, for agreeing to be on the show. And then our thanks also go out to Radhika and Hilary Kung of Third World Network, who are over there in Belém and continuing to report on a daily basis on the ongoing COP30. With that, I would like to end this first segment and pass it back to the Secretariat for the next segment. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it.
A heartfelt thank you to Dr. Gary and Ms. Aznie for sharing your thoughtful insights in today's session. So now, moving forward, we would like to move on to the next session, which will be the C-Suite's highlight, which will be moderated by CGM Council member Dato Sri Johan Raslan, together with fellow CGM Council member Wong Seng, who is also the former country managing partner at Iyer. The floor is yours, Dato Sri and Mr. Wong Seng.
Thank you very much, Aaron.
Hi, good morning, Johan.
Hi. Morning, SK. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome. I'll just introduce SK here, Wong Seng Ki. As Aaron mentioned, he is formerly managing partner of ERM. He's also a council member of Climate Governance Malaysia with me, which is wonderful for me. Sort of lesser known facts, he spent 24 years in Shell, so very much, oil and gas, LNG guy. He's worked in Bangkok, London, Singapore, and Houston. So he's sort of been around the world quite a lot. And but it's always important to know where we started from. And he is a Ipoh boy which is great for me as also Parakian. So that's lovely. So he's going to talk to us today, and we're going to answer some questions. And in this no regrets session, we're going to have, let's say, a couple of things. What is climate adaptation? What is the difference between climate adaptation, climate mitigation? Why is climate adaptation important for business? These and many other questions will be answered by SK. Now we'll feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box or the chat box. We know that nobody actually cares which box you want to put, just put la. But we can't promise to get to them because this is only a half-hour slot. So we'll do what we can, but no promises. Unlike the longer sessions. Right. With that, over to you, SK.
Hi, thanks, Johan, and good morning, audience. Many happy to be here this morning. And while COP30 is happening in Brazil, I think it's a great opportunity for us to share a little bit of how we see the adaptation in actions. So actually, I prepared a couple of slides to actually set a little bit of context, but I also actually wanted to have a little bit more discussions. I mean, I'm mindful we are running only have 25 minutes now, Johan. So let's see how we do with the progress. Yeah. So allow me to share some slides to start the conversation. So I think I just listened in to Dr. Gary just now. I think it's very much in deep discussion about some of the climate adaptation in actions in Klang Valley. I also mindful of we have a diverse group of audience. So I'd like to actually go back to look at what exactly do we mean by climate adaptations, right? This is actually a process to adjust to the actual and expected climate realities to reduce vulnerabilities and build resilience, right? And I mean, we are all facing the climate impact now, right? As individual, as businesses, right? So climate change, like flooding, that we talked about a lot just now in Dr. Gary's sessions. Not forgetting on the other extreme is drought, right? And also the rise of sea level, food security. These are a lot of the key concerns we have due to the more severe weather, the more severe sort of climate challenges we have. But also, I also don't want to look at this from the doom and gloom perspective. Also, there are a lot of opportunity that we'd like to discuss a little bit on new businesses and opportunity. And I like to draw my experience from the work that ERM have done with the various clients later on, and sharing some of the actions that they have done. All right. So now I'd like to actually very quickly go into explaining what is climate adaptations versus climate mitigations. And I say both are important, but adaptation is dealing with the effect of climate change that are already occurring now and unavoidable, right? For example, right, building seawalls to protect coastal communities from rising sea level. I mean, we heard Jakarta building a huge seawall, developing drought resilience crops for food security, which I'll share some example later on. Improving the water storage and drainage system, right? I think in Malaysia is blessed with a lot of water, right? But on the flip side, is also we are unfortunately encounter a lot of flooding. So it's how community, how businesses need to actually manage the flooding challenges. Yep. Mitigation. What is climate mitigations? This is tackling the root cause by reducing GHG, greenhouse gas, right? So this is important. I think mitigation is I think always have a role to play to reduce our carbon footprint. And some simple examples, switching to solar power to reduce carbon emissions, using EVs to reduce transportation emissions. Take more public transport if you can, right? And personally, I don't drive any ICE car anymore. I have 2 EVs, me and my wife. We don't have ICE car anymore. Yeah. And enhancing carbon sinks through forward protection as an example, right? So there's a difference between adaptation and mitigation. And to me, I think both are important. One is we have to, for mitigation, we need to reduce the GHG. We need to reduce the warming of the planet. But I think the reality is we are already facing severe weather pattern. So adaptation is now and now, yeah? Right? So when we talk about adaptations, also there are different type of adaptations broadly. First is incremental adaptations. These are actions designed to maintain the excellence and integrity of a system or process at a given locations. When we talk about climate adaptation, this is very localized issues that we have to deal with. For example, a farmer installing more efficient drip irrigations to cope with less rainfall, right? Yeah. And a city building higher decks to protect against flooding, right? I mentioned just now, like example in Jakarta, right? Whereas like transformation adaptation, they also like other adaptation measures. These are actions taken to change the fundamental attributes of a system in response to climate change and impacts. For example, a community relocating entirely from a coastal area that is being submerged. A farmer switching from growing coffee to a more heat-tolerant crop. Yeah. So these are the difference between incremental adaptations versus transformation adaptations. And after knowing the concept, now I like to actually share a little bit why climate adaptation is important for business, regardless of the size, whether you are SME, whether you are PLCs, right? So it's important to understand why is it important for business, right? First is protecting physical asset and operations, right? Climate threats to business infrastructure, and these are real, right? Extreme weather events. We see flooding, wildfires, typhoon, severe storm. As we speak now, I think like typhoon is hitting like Philippines, Hong Kong, friends in Taiwan, right? They are still having the brunt of the typhoon, and now we are leading towards November now, and destroying this. Unfortunately, will damage or destroy factories, warehouse, offices, and retail outlets, right? So there's a lot of severe weather events, and there's a lot of negative impact to the businesses. Rise of sea level and coastal erosions. This is another challenge. When the world is warming up, there are more ice melted, and the circulation of the water between the air and also the water actually impacting the rise of seawater. And this actually coastal operation like ports, like hotels, apartments face existential threats from rising sea, right? For example, right, in Penang, like we see like even like very nice like hotel like Raslan, Shangri-La Raslan are building some sea baits to actually help to protect the water coming to the hotel. Chronic stressor, and this also from the flip side, extreme heat waves, stress equipments, melt routes, and bucket railway lines disrupting supply chain, right? So these are some of the real threats to the physical assets and operations, and how this is actually impacting business from different areas, either your direct financial losses, costly repairs, operations downtime, or increased insurance costs. And unfortunately, some even uninsurable anymore, right? Some situations and some locations. Right. Second, I'd like to actually go to look at another important angles to look at for a talk about like climate adaptation. This ensuring supply chain resilience, right? As always understand in the modern supply chains are inherently very global, complex, and often fatigued and fragile, right? Here I quote some example, right? From a chain from the supplier to factory to warehouse to retail and then end with customers. It could go through many different chains, like suppliers, like say the farmers could face a drought, actually impacting the yield of their crops, right? Factory potentially can subject to flooding or storm or hurricane or warehouse, right? Retail business, right? If you're outdoor, heat wave actually will impact productivity before it actually ends with customers, right? So like some example I like to quote here is like, for example, like crop failures. A drought in one region can disrupt the supply of raw material for food and beverages, right? And this is not only food and beverages, textile, or even biofuel for that matters, right? Biofuel companies as a feedstock. Port disruption. A typhoon shutting down a major port, let's say what happened in Taiwan and Philippines now, can halt the delivery of certain components and halting like production lines across the globe. Yeah. Infrastructure failure. Right, a flood that knocked out a key supply factory or a bridge on a major trucking route create immediate bottleneck. Right, these are real. Right, so as a let's say if you're in a retailing business serving your customers, how you're actually going to start looking at different supply sources, right, from different geographic location to mitigate some of the potential climate risks. Right. third, I'd like to actually go to talk about a little bit on how managing financial and regulation risks, right? And why this is important for business, why adaptation is important for business. I think first, investors scrutiny. I think investors are certainly getting much more active now to actually understand the risk of the climate. They do their own assessment and evaluation before they're investing in businesses. And businesses without adaptation plan are seen as high risk investment, right? And then you may get unfortunately, some of these businesses may be actually getting a huge discount because of your vulnerability. Second is rising insurance costs, right? Insurers are repricing climate-related risks. I think this is real, right? Some areas have become uninsurable, I mentioned just now, with insurers withdrawing from wildfire or typhoon-prone markets or hurricane-prone markets, right? So this is a challenge, right? You think that you can pass on some of this risk to your insurers, but some, you actually hit back on you, either through higher premium or through some you may not be uninsurable. And emergent regulations, right? Governments are mandating climate risk disclosure and adaptation planning, right? I'd like to quote an example in Malaysia, the National Sustainability Reporting Framework, which actually mandatory all the PLCs starting from 2027 to report IFRS S2. These are International Financial Reporting Standard S2, which related to climate, how the climate matters or risks are impacting your business. Proactive strategy ensuring compliance and avoid penalties. Right. Fourth, this is related to securing market share and driving innovation. Again, I like to actually see it from a light of a bit more positive, right? For example, there's a good opportunity for innovation or create more new product to secure new market. For example, right, drought resilience crops, water efficiency technologies, and climate resilient infrastructure, which I will share a bit more when I talk about the construction and real estate sectors later on, and risk analytics softwares. Second, first mover advantage. Company that diversify supply chain or develop resilient logistic network can continue operating when their competitors paralyze, and this, they will actually capture market share. If a company is more ready than your competitors, you will be in an advantage positions. Meeting customer demand, right? Customer in a B2B business or B2C business are increasing value resilience, right? Those companies that actually fulfill your promises to use climate adaptation is a very powerful marketing tool. And last, I think this is a fifth point and why this is important to business. I'd like to actually bring it back to the safeguarding human capital. This on the people side, right? First is employee health and safety. Extreme heat poses health risk to outdoor workers, be it in the agriculture sector, construction sectors, and so on, and can affect productivity in even the non-AC facilities in some manufacturing plants when the heat is become more severe. Second, operation disruption. If employee cannot go to work due to flooded routes, right? What happened, like the big flood in December 2021, right? Even the ports like North Port, West Port, some of the stuff is impacted, right? Even though the port is actually above water. But the challenge is like the workers, right? If they're dealing with personal crisis from climate events, productivity will plummet. And attracting talents. New generation of employees prefer to work for companies that are responsible and more forward-thinking. A clear climate adaptation strategy enhance a company brand as an employer. I'd like to pause here for a while, Johan. How am I doing with time before I go to the case studies?
Sorry, yes, you are doing... okay, we got about 12 minutes to go, so you're fine.
All right, so shall I continue or shall I
think so. Yeah.
to address some questions?
No, let's keep going. We haven't actually got any questions up there yet.
All right, okay, I'll keep going, yeah. So now actually I'd like to actually bring all this home by actually sharing some of the case studies that actually we have, ERM has actually served for multiple clients, right? I actually bring into 4 sectors which have actually most impacted by the climate change, and adaptation as really critical for their survival. I think the first I'd like to talk about the agriculture and food production business, right? The climate risks faced by this business are very clear, right? Drought, floods, heat stress, soil degradations, and pest outbreak, right? These are all real, right? To actually impacting the food supply chain and the agriculture business, right? So the some of the adaptation measures, right? I'd like to actually quote some example for different clients, like operation, like for example, like CP Group. They are, headquarters in Thailand. They own the Lotus supermarket in Malaysia from Tesco. They bought the over from Tesco. They are one of the world's largest agriculture and food supplier, right? So like crop diversification is important for them, right? And also like heat resistant or drought tolerant varieties. I think from the crop side, I think they restarted the process to ensure that they are more robust, the crops that they actually select. Efficient irrigation and water recycling. I think this is actually being used by a lot of different agri players. And also, I'd like to jump to bullet point number 4 first, and when I still talk about CP Group. The second is diversification, geographic de-risking, right? We know, I think the weather challenges for all the different locations. So like diversify operation geographically, right? Like CP Groups operate in more than 20 countries, right? They have different agricultural plants, right, in Thailand, in US, right, in Latin America and other places. And this actually mitigate regional specific climate shocks, right? Also another example, right? Some of the plantation company we are looking at, right? Let's say, for example, IOI Corp, right? Which is a very big palm oil plantation companies. They have a strong presence in Sarawak, Sabah, but also in a big footprint in Indonesia, right? So this, in a way, this also diversified geographically to help them to actually mitigate, the severe weather pattern on different specific locations. And technology, I think now I'd like to actually go to talk about a bit on technology. Precision agriculture using sensor and data analytics are getting more active now, right? Companies are actually using more technology base to actually monitor water, how actually dripping waters, if it's actually look at less rainfall, and also sensor, look at the soil, the health of the soil and so on. Ecosystem-based agroforestry, regenerative agriculture is a big thing for our ICOP, right? A lot of the empty food bunch are being recycled and munched and put back to soil to actually make it more moist, make the soil more healthy, so that they actually get a better yield for their crops, right? And also diversification is also important, consideration for a company like Nestle Malaysia, right, which is a very big food producer and a retail player, FMCG players, right? They have a very big program about how to actually educate their farmers, chili planters, and the coffee planters on actually using more resilient crops, right, and more robust crop to actually deal with the severe weather patterns. Second, I'd like to actually go to another sector, which is real estate and constructions, right? I think the climate risk, again, flooding is a big challenge, right? How you actually manage flooding, right, to ensure your real estate are still valuable, right? Heat waves will actually impacting the productivity, or because all the construction workers are working under hot suns most of the days, or sometimes heavy rains. And how do we actually help to manage this? And sea level rises, and if let's say some of the development is close to the coastal, this is some of the challenges you face. And also not forgetting, right, sinkhole, landslides, extreme rainfall, right? These are all may impact and damaging your buildings and your robustness of your township and so on, right? Some of the adaptation measures, we see, right, is actually working with different clients, is physical resilience, right? This is actually given, right? Elevated structure, need to understand your drainage system, right? Heat reflective materials, flooding barriers, and these are, I think we work with a lot of the different clients. This in the light of our property group, MRCB and others, right? KLCCP and so on. I think these are all being implemented. I think the assessment part is very critical for them. Water management strategies to actually how to actually manage stormwater, building township, Samtabi, right? Building strong township to actually ensure that there's enough of green lungs, there's actually ponds. Just I heard I mentioned about even soccer field are used to actually as water retention, mitigation measures, right? To adaptation measures, right? To actually reduce the fast flow of runaway waters, right? and also design and operations, right? Energy efficiency. This is look at heating, ventilation, cooling, right? Our property groups actually built about 4 gigawatts of like rooftop solar in the Hawaii City Mall, right? Yep. And also like financial policy, like green buildings. I think like a lot of the companies now are very serious about ensuring that they meet the GPI Malaysia standards on their new condo project, business towers, so that like all these actually, I think there's certain rules they have to follow to ensure that like energy efficiency, like lighting, inverters, like AC systems, right? And how to actually make it more like green rooftop and so on. Yeah. And third, I'd like to actually talk a little bit on the transportation logistic, right? And this is, again, I think Malaysia, I think especially like Peninsula Malaysia, really blessed, right? You are actually sitting on the Strait of Malacca. There are 2 ports, 2 big container ports, West Port and PDP, Port Tanjung Pelepas, which are ERM clients. Then there are actually like 80% of the, I think, the global traffic flow, right? Container shipping actually go through Strait of Malacca, right? On the flip side, they also not avoided by the disrupted ports, routes, and supply chain due to storm and floods, right? So again, adaptation measures. This is the climate-proof logistic hubs, elevated ports, right? There's a very thorough study about for wet port, how actually we deal with like redundancy, how you actually build drainage, more effective drainage, like sentiment, how you actually for dredging and so on, and to ensure that actually your operation are more efficient. And also, I think utilizing a lot, I think this is to do with like Westport, like Malaysia airports and so on, are the digital logistic platform, right? To actually look at the severe weather pattern, really understand the early warning signs of like some of the weather, either this is actually the strong wind or even like a storm coming in, and how you actually start to mitigating your operations, right? And again, the other part is also on like mitigation, which are EV and low carbon fleets, fuel efficiency upgrades and so on. Yeah. I think this is the last sector I'd like to go to. This is actually financial sectors. Yeah. And this actually, from financial sector perspective, the climate risk is more indirect. This is a credit investment losses from client exposure to extreme weather, right? So I think here, like work with a lot of the different banks and insurance company, right? And the climate risk integration is important integrated into enterprise risk management, right? Bank Negara actually mandated all the banks to look at like climate scenario analysis and how this actually impacting your loans, your financing, your investment, right? And also like the client we work with is also portfolio management side. It's actually diversify away from high risk sectors, and also like doing a lot of like climate risk stress testing with their client, and building a lot of the capacity building together with client. This engagement, advising client on adaptation finance, and also giving incentive, right? Even for the insurance company, MNRB and so on, giving incentive to the clients if they actually demonstrate that they actually adopt and adapt climate adaptation strategies, right? Now I'd like to actually finalize 3 key takeaways from me, right? And why this is climate is important. I think mindful, I think the audience actually could be coming from SME, coming from like big PLCs. But I think first is actually very important is do your own self-assessment. Identify what is really relevant for you, for your business, right? For example, even for ourselves, right? When we go out wearing a T-shirt, right, go out to KL, do we bring an umbrella? Do we actually bring a raincoat? They may having a rainy afternoon, or do we actually also bring a sweater? We go into a mall, it's colder, right? So how do we actually prepare ourselves to actually deal with different eventuality of the weather pattern, right? And capacity building is very important, and formulate adaptation strategies. I think first start with self, and this is either from a self-individual perspective or the business perspective. I think the second, alliances, building alliances and community. I think learning from your peers, right? Like different sectors, what is actually I think like just I'm sharing about like agri sectors, right? Logistics sectors, all of them having face the similar challenges. How you learn from each others, just through your associations, through alliances, and capacity build with your community. Always bring your community in play, because they, like indigenous people, the local community, they are facing this day in, day out, leverage on their local knowledge to help you, right, to build a more robust and resilient adaptation strategies. And last but not least, also like government collaborations, right? Like data and AI, early severe weather warning notice, I think it's important. Nurturing more climate savvy talents, right? Businesses. Also, there are a lot of new business opportunity because of the changing climate patterns. And building and sharing more robust climate resilient infrastructure. Talked quite a lot just now, right? Look at the flood tunnels and so on, and all the different townships that built by all the different developers, right? So these are the key takeaway I see. I summarize is like really we need to understand self and how you actually build your alliances and community, and government, even like for example like the ASEAN power grid. I think this is a great example to build more robust infrastructure, right, together to actually withstand more severe weather going forward, right? And again, I think I like to actually see this from a transformative perspective, from a reactive piecemeal effort to become a proactive, systematic, and equitable process. We need to really bring in the local community, right? Last, I like to actually look at the future we choose. Just like to quote two quotes. One is from Christina Figueres, the former Secretary General of UNFCCC. The last generation lacked technology, capital, and global reach. I think the next generation is too late. It's our time to act now. Yeah. And second is from Sir David Attenborough. I think always know him, very famous, right? In a new broadcaster in many different program of documentary, nice documentary about nature, planet, climate. Never before have we had such an awareness of what we are doing to the planet. And never before had we had the power to do something about that. I think the time to act is now. Yeah. I'd like to actually end with these two quotes. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Wonderful, SK. Thank you so much for that. You've given us some wonderful contents, and you've ended with your three key messages. Companies need to understand what's most relevant to them, the climate issues that affect them. You've gone inside out and how to upskill your workforce and adapt to the issues, and outside in, building alliances in the sector to help each other out. And this is the last thing is so important, I feel. You know, what we're talking about here overrides all issues in terms of the companies, all issues of competitiveness. And actually, we all win if we work together and in order to combat climate change. Thank you so much, SK. A model presentation, as I say. You end with your 3 points and 3 takeaways. Brilliant. And you have 2 quotes. And you have done Malaysia, the cause, and our state of proud. Thank you very much.
There's some question, Johan. I'm not sure whether you address them.
I didn't see any. Oh, sorry. They popped up. Do you want to try? Do you want to try? We have a couple of minutes actually. We've been because it's so good. SK, they've given us a couple more minutes. So why don't you have? Can you read them, or should I read them to you? So
you go for it.
Okay. Plantation players are highly cost sensitive. So how do you convince them that climate change is not a future problem? So we're talking about plantations, but a catastrophe that should have been addressed yesterday, and the next best time is now. The bigger players might recognize the impact, but what about the general mass, small scale operators in the plantation sector? How do you get their buy-in?
Yeah, I think great questions. Thanks. Saravana. Yeah,
there's only one more question after that. From Tukumarina. I think that one was from Saravana Pillai from Ecotera Malaysia. Next one, I'll say it to you. You can answer them all together. Tukumarina, our fellow council member, she said, "What can we expect on adaptation initiatives in the climate change bill?" The other is not a question. It's thanking Yasota is thanking you for comprehensive coverage. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Johan. Let me address the first one, right? Especially for the small estate holders, right? And again, this survival, right? To me, this is survival. And again, I think like a lot of the big companies, like I'm talking about some of the clients we work with, be it IY Corp, be it like KLK, and also understand from the market out there, like SD, Guthrie, and so on. They're actually working a lot with the small holders, right? Because those planters are feeding up to their mill as well. Right, I think the feedstock to the mill. I think the survival or the yield of the crops for the small planters are critical. So I think first is capacity building. I think like the big planters are doing a lot of initiative to actually share with the small real estate holders, right? The small estate holders. What are some of the ways to actually make let's say for example the soil, right? Like we work a lot. With like our ICOP and so on. Like it's how they are very big in regenerative agriculture, right? Because like for example, once you extract the palm oil seed, right? The empty fruit bunch. Those are how to use it. Right? There are multiple ways to use it. One way is actually slice to a smaller like munch to actually use it for soil, right? And those are the practices that smallholders can do the same, right? Again, it's a bit of knowledge sharing, a bit of like how you actually build the habit to do this going forward, right? I think like again, I think there's a collaboration with the community, right, for big company, and I'm sure RSPO and others are doing a lot of those initiatives to actually educate the smallholders as well. Yeah, not sure whether I answered the question, Johan. I think it's a collaboration to me, like right, collaboration and understand what some of the best practices and how actually implemented to the small stakeholders. Yeah,
sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think the second question from the Marina is like, well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think like from my perspective, right? So the sharing I mentioned just now is like, I think the climate issues are here now, right? I think like for Malaysia specifically, again, when I talk about climate adaptation, it's very localized, right? Whatever happened, let's say to the East Coast during the monsoon season may not impacting so much on the West Coast, right? But again, how do we actually apply and adapt different sort of like adaptation strategy to the localized environment, right? And again, I think like infrastructure is important, right? Again, those are more long term, like just how I think Annie mentioned, right, before our session. You want to build a new storm, so large drainage, it takes 5 years, 10 years, right? But I think what is there to do to adapt, right? I think like start with self, like I mentioned the example just now, right? If you go out now, weather is hot, you bring a bottle of water. Do you also bring an umbrella to actually deal with the afternoon rains? Or do you actually bring a sweater when you walk into a mall, which is with very cold AC, or even to a conference, right, nowadays? So those are the things that how you practice that. I think we start with self. And also like the community side, I think certainly like what we are doing now in Climate Governance Malaysia, we want to actually capacity build the community, right, to actually create more awareness so that people know what are some of the things you can actually, where you can read, where can you adapt, where can you apply what you actually know, right, to actually like make you more climate resilient and more robust, right? And also, I'm sure the government have their own role to play, right? Yeah. And again, I think it's important, not forgetting, even though we talk about the adaptation piece, we also need to understand about the mitigation piece. I think the driving down the greenhouse gas, right, continue to put effort to reduce the warming of the globe. I think all these are important factors. We need to work hand in hand. Yeah. I think maybe I stop there. Yeah, Johan?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for that. We've used a few extra minutes. Apologies to the next act that's coming in, and thank you, everybody. Sorry we didn't answer your question, but that's a question that seems to be. I think that's your excellent question can be answered by really anybody else during the time there. It's an all-rounder sort of question. Look forward to hearing the answer to that. Thank you very much. Handing back now to Aaron, our new joiner in CGM. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato Seri and Mr. Wong Seng for the insightful discussion and the presentation. We would now like to move on to the next part of the session, where we will be featuring a segment known as Live from Belém, Brazil segment. The segment, which is curated by the Boston Consulting Group Singapore office, features a speech by Mr. Dave Sivaprasad, the Managing Director and partner and Southeast Asia lead for climate and sustainability at BCG Singapore. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mr. Dave.
Hello, hi everyone. Arun, thanks for the kind introduction. I don't have very good internet here, so I'm not going to be on video. And hopefully you can hear me. And if it cuts out, please let me know. So thank you for this. Live from Belém. We'll have a few of these over the course of the next 2 weeks. it has just been the start of COP, as you know. There are a few notable observations that are actually quite relevant for Southeast Asia and our region as well. Um, so across the adaptation agenda has been very, very prominent in most of the engagement. So we're sentiment of this being an adaptation top and implementation top is very obviously just from the engagements, the themes of focus and any of the discussion. So first is adaptation is very, very high on it. Second is nature, and nature forestry, biodiversity is also a topic of huge prominence in the top agenda and top action agenda. And the third thing is so there is several negotiations that are going on, and many of the observations I'm sharing from our engagements are that the non-negotiated, the action agenda driven by almost a non-state actor agenda, and here it is a very comprehensive 30 action points that the COP presidency is driving in the action agenda, which covers all the key issues that need to be addressed, and it features very prominently from a standpoint of this is implementation focused COP, as the Brazil presidency has stated, and this action agenda with 30 different points almost covers all the aspects of climate adaptation, mitigation, nature, financing, all the enablers. And that is very, very encouraging. So early days, it has just started, and we'll see more as we go. So as we two parallel tracks, one is the negotiated outcomes, and the other is all the action agenda and what non-state actors do. We'll share impressions on the non-state action agenda aspect of what we're observing at COP and in Bel-Air. On the negotiated outcomes, these come as statements as this progresses, and then we'll share at least one of the impressions that we're hearing beyond what the media and the news are reporting. So let me pause there. As I said, it's just early days. We just started, but these are some of the impressions we will see. Arun, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dave, for that insightful presentation from the Boston Consulting Group. So now we would like to move on to the next section, which is the NGO Pavillion by WWF-Malaysia, that has been thoughtfully curated by them. Today's keynote speaker from WWF-Malaysia will be Ms. Lakshmi Lavanya Rama Iyer, Director of Policy and Climate Change for WWF-Malaysia. Let us welcome Ms. Lakshmi.
Good morning, and good to be back again today. Okay. So yeah, I think we have had, thanks, Gary. We have had a really excellent sharing on adaptation this morning. So it's a pleasure for WWF now to present some of the things that we are doing in this space as well. And great to see that Dave just preceded this, because Dave and BCG are a partner in what I'm going to share hereafter, along with Think City in Malaysia. So we have heard a lot about the importance of adaptation, and of course, central to this is how do we balance both adaptation and mitigation, and ultimately the objective would be to reduce loss and damage, which unfortunately we are seeing increasingly rise as the climate continues to change. as emissions continue to, saturate the atmospheric space. And Aznie gave a great presentation on, what's happening in Selangor and what is potentially going to be our future here in Selangor. I'm a resident of Selangor as well. So with that, let me maybe present to you now an effort that we as WWF are undertaking to, hang on, Ayn, not yet, to advance this our collective efforts on adaptation. And our focus, as I mentioned, is to ensure that our region here in Southeast Asia is adequately protected, adequately prepared to deal with the onslaught, if you like, of climate change, as has been quite well described by the previous speakers. Before I present the actual effort or the initiative that we have embarked on, let me give you a little bit of background on the context that we are situated in. So, now, we are in Southeast Asia, and as you all well know, Malaysia has just successfully completed the chairship of the ASEAN meeting. And Southeast Asia itself is a global economic powerhouse. We are the fourth largest economy. We are projected to be the fourth largest economy by 2030. We have the third largest labor pool in the world, and more than 50% of our population are under 30 years old. So, and in addition to that, we are also very rich in what we might term as the attributes of nature, or what is also referred to as natural capital and biodiversity. So, in Southeast Asia, we have major tracts of nature still vibrant and still giving us a lot of valuable services that we all rely on. This includes the Heart of Borneo, which is the largest transboundary forest providing life and livelihoods for about 11 million Borneans. We have the Mekong River Basin, which is home to more than 20,000 species of plants, more than 1,000 bird species, and 1,000 species of reptiles and amphibians, 500 mammal species. So very rich, very vibrant. And not forgetting the marine space, we are also very much within what we call the Coral Triangle, which is home to about 500 plus coral species, and 2,000 species of reef fish, and of the 7 marine turtle species, we have 6 of them here. So really rich and vibrant nature, and really strong potential for communities to be vibrant and for economies to flourish. Nevertheless, we have also been in the forefront of being impacted by climate disasters. Recent ones, as you would all well know, include here in Malaysia, in Sabah, we had terrible floods and landslides that destroyed homes and killed 13 people. 100 villages were affected. 2,900 people had to leave their homes. And experts do attribute this to the changing climate and the loss of natural flood protection, unfortunately, due to development. And then across the region, we have had these typhoons. In November, we had Kalmegi in Vietnam. which was also in Philippines earlier, also affecting lives and livelihoods. In Philippines, about 140 people were killed, 127 went missing. And now we are also having Typhoon Wong. And earlier, during the discussions, I think Aznie and Gary mentioned about even Malaysia having, tornadoes, is it? And phenomena that we have never ever encountered before. So this region, whilst quite vulnerable, is still has a strong potential for action that can be taken to overcome these challenges. Now, the massive cost of inaction across social, economic, and natural systems in Southeast Asia have been somewhat worked out in big numbers. So in terms of social costs, we would be looking at about, say, 437,000 mortality in Southeast Asia already from disasters that is ranging from 1970 right up to 2023. And it's estimated that 68% of the population are exposed to climate change impacts. From the economic side, it is estimated that by 2050, if nothing's done, we are looking at almost 40% of ASEAN GDP loss. And that actually works out to be 1.1 times higher in terms of damage compared to the rest of the world for ASEAN. And in terms of natural systems, we are running the risk of losing about 42% of species in by 2100, including 90% of coral reefs in the region. I told you this is a very rich area for corals. We are part of the Coral Triangle Initiative, which would be facing annual bleaching by not very far down the line by 2030, right? So there is a lot at stake here, but at the same time, there is a silver lining, and we are actually well positioned to leverage on both our rich natural capital as well as the rise in technology for climate adaptation and resilience. So we have attributes like tropical forests with restoration, they can actually provide a lot of climate resilience as well as support for biodiversity. Our river basins can be enhanced, such as along Mekong, and which is already in some instances being done with riparian vegetation to stabilize riverbanks and prevent riverbank erosion during monsoon rains. Aznie touched upon, how do we manage our rivers as well. So there are some examples as well that we can, learn from each other. SK mentioned about in his intervention earlier, the importance of, building alliances and having communities that work together. So, we really need to start building these kind of sharing platforms where we can see what's happening elsewhere, learn from them, and also adjust according to our own needs. We have biodiversity hotspots where we can protect and connect forest corridors that will not only, create buffers, but also increase our resilience. Coastal and marine ecosystems, which can also, by protecting them, protect our shorelines from wave damage. I think, SK, you talked about the, Penang instance and how, even our tourism industry is being affected. And urbanized cities where we can use more of nature's attributes. And this is also happening already, I think, in Penang, where nature-based solutions are being looked at as an approach towards addressing climate impacts. Then all this can be complemented very nicely by the rise of technology. So we have data-driven intelligence. So you can use AI, geospatial tools, analytics to process complex data sets and generate actionable climate risk insights. So Aznie mentioned previously, we are still planning according to what happened in history, but what we need is to have that crystal ball to look into the future. We don't have the crystal ball, but these kind of technological advances can give us a better indication of, the multiple pathways that our climate risks can impact us. So it gives us better insights into that. Real-time climate sensing. So you can deploy sensors and early warning systems to detect environmental changes early enough and trigger faster adaptation responses, or at least warning to affected communities. We have green hardware that can extend the impact, the positive impacts that we want to set. So like we can leverage on drones or modular systems, green gray infrastructures to scale up nature-based solutions, especially in hard-to-reach areas. And most importantly, impact quantification engines. So model future scenarios to assess the value of nature-based solutions and the costs of inaction. So often we come to this point with adaptation where we say, well, we don't know how to measure the value of investing in adaptation because it's, in a way, it's avoided loss. So if it doesn't happen, what are you measuring? So in this sense, when you have these tools that can actually tell you what is at risk, what you are, at risk of losing, and then how the measures that you take now can prevent that, that's risk management, which I'm sure, the insurance folks are very familiar with. This gives you the ability to measure the impact that you are creating. Now, just very quickly, these kind of approaches where we combine nature-based solutions and tech, they're expected to yield promising outcomes. And in fact, they are already being employed in certain places. For example, in Sri Lanka, they are using wetland-based urban flood management, where they've transformed wetlands into rainwater retention basins for improved drainage, and supported by flood risk mapping using a GIS system. And Myanmar, they are looking at drone-planted mangrove forests where, they reduce the effects of climate change by first assessing the soil condition and all with the technology, and then rapidly planting seeds in remote areas using drones. So there are a lot of other examples that are out there. And I also wanted to say closer to home in Singapore, for example, there is a interesting action that was taken to mitigate floods. They had a big storm drain in Bishan, which they decided was not actually doing its job. I think Aznie mentioned also, right? We have these straight infrastructure, linear infrastructure, which may not necessarily be the right thing for those places. So what they did was they removed it and restored it back to what it was previously, which was a meandering river. And they did this with the idea of helping biodiversity, have a space, and restore habitat for them. And what they have found is, yes, it's been very beneficial for biodiversity, but in addition to that, they have also found that it's mitigated flood risks because the way the river meanders, it controls the flow of the river, it slows it down, and acts as a natural measure to reduce the otherwise stronger flooding that would have occurred. And it's also provided a space for recreation. So there are multiple benefits that came when they restored that drain, that hard infrastructure, back to what it was before in terms of its natural meandering river. So with that, maybe now we can put up the first slide, please. So based on all of this, the WWF and BCG and Think City, we were in COP28, and we were looking at, COP27 in Egypt, and we were looking at, that time, there was, the issue of adaptation started becoming more important. I think it was just following the floods in Pakistan. And there was a lot of, more attention finally being paid to adaptation. However, we noticed that, adaptation or risks, vulnerabilities in this region, in Southeast Asia, was rather lacking. So we decided that it was time that we, put a spotlight on what's happening in this region. As I mentioned, this region is actually a very important region, not just for our own well-being, but actually across the globe as well. In terms of being, positioned as the fourth largest trading area, in the next few years, means that the global economy depends on what's happening in this region. And I think that point was also made by Gary earlier when he talked about how Malaysia raised the intractable interconnection between different countries, between different communities. When it comes to adaptation, long has it been thought that it's just a localized issue, but actually it's intractably interconnected, and we all need to also pay attention to adaptation as a global concern, just like we're doing with mitigation. So the three core partners, as you can see, BCG, Think City, and WWF, decided to form what we call the SECA Alliance, the Southeast Asia Climate Adaptation and Resilience Alliance, to essentially address this adaptation and resilience agenda in the region. We felt that a regional approach is relevant because, we are all actually very much interlinked as well. And at the heart of it is collaborative action. And I think that was emphasized by all the speakers earlier, that we all really need to put our heads together. And that's why an alliance that, works together, that shares, good examples, that supports each other, was what we felt was needed for the region to advance our resilience against climate change. And we were looking at, if you look at the donut, we have 6 areas. So to focus on these 6 thematic areas, if you like: natural ecosystems, and water in terms of, say, environment, agriculture, health in terms of human well-being, and of course, infrastructure and trade in terms of economy. And on the outer circle is what we already talked about earlier, the importance of basing all our actions on nature-based solutions informed by climate analytics and AI, artificial intelligence, really for the benefit of cities and communities, people. People are the heart of all of this. And one very beneficial thing that we have to remember about nature-based solutions is it's not just one-dimensional. It doesn't just address one problem. Nature-based solutions, by its very definition, addresses multiple societal challenges at one go. So better bang for the buck, right? So as we address climate risks, we are also at the same time addressing other issues like food security, water security, disaster risk reduction, climate mitigation, and also protecting biodiversity. So I really like what the director of parks of Bishan mentioned in when they were talking about why they did that intervention in Bishan to restore the monsoon drain back into a river. She said that when you work to serve biodiversity or to protect biodiversity, there will always be climate benefits. But it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. If you're just focused on climate action, let's say just climate mitigation, putting, say, large solar farms in forests, it doesn't necessarily serve biodiversity needs. So that's a good point to remember, because I think what we are trying to say is our starting point for adaptation should always look at working with nature and looking at what are the services that we can continue to work and use and apply sensibly with nature to protect biodiversity. That should be the starting point and build out from there, rather than what we tend to do, which is, unfortunately, in the effort to address some of these problems, we destroy nature. Now, let me illustrate that. Before that, let me just show you, next slide, please, Ayn. So these are the two reports that the Sika Alliance has come up with. The first one was released in 2023 at COP28, The Might of Nature and Power of Technology. And this is really a call to action to advance climate adaptation and resilience across Southeast Asia. And then the second one, which has just come out of the oven, if you'd like, which was just recently launched, is called the Adaptation and Resilience to Collaboration and Innovation. This report builds on the first and highlights various case studies across the region. We are featuring examples from 5 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Singapore, and Vietnam, as well as looking at some of the regional issues like trade impact, and also regional tools, like there is climate data that's generated by climate projection initiative called Codex. So this report has just been launched. It's they are available on online for free for you all to look at, and I'll share the QR code shortly. But just to say that the former Minister of Environment and Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, YB Nazmi, has generously given a keynote, generously given opening remarks for this report, and he gave a keynote last year in Baku for our event on this. And this Saturday also he's going to be speaking at this Alta COP event in KL. So we invite you to look at these resources, but I just wanted to highlight one example from now Malaysia, which is also featured in our second report, which is the efforts by the Friends of Bukit Kiara. So here's where the community came together to protect the Bukit Kiara Federal Park. And, it was a long battle, and they finally managed to protect the remaining 25% of what was originally there, initially of 621 hectares. And because of their efforts, and this took like 20, 30 years, I think, in the works, but they have been really, making sure that they protect this area for the biodiversity value that they all really valued and enjoyed. What happened was in 2021, when the big floods happened, which I think also Aznie mentioned earlier, the forests, the areas that they had protected actually served to act as a natural buffer, and it absorbed excess rainwater and served as a key role for flood mitigation. So the area next to Bukit Kiara, this big residential area called Taman Tun Dr. Ismail, was spared major flooding, although the storm drains had collapsed due to extreme water flow. And essentially, the residents have now realized that without Bukit Kiara's absorption capacity, Taman Tun would have also likely been submerged, like what happened in this Sri Muda case in Klang. So, there are many values that that the Bukit Kiara forest is providing for the residents there, not only in terms of flood mitigation, but also in mitigating heat island effect as well. So the green spaces around our urban areas are actually very important. They provide multiple benefits and should really be restored, and those areas that are remaining should really be conserved, because these are the best defenses to the climate that is unfortunately continuously changing. Now, what I'd like to leave us all with is, some of the lessons learned from looking at all the examples that we have featured in the second report is key. The key thing is multi-sectoral collaboration is really the key. So always, and SK also mentioned this, involve your communities and governments, CSOs, academics, and businesses to work together to come up with solutions, because only when you bring in all perspectives will you get solutions that withstand many different stressors that we are increasingly facing. Of course, there are financial barriers, because that's always been climate adaptation has always been regarded as a local issue. But I think more and more businesses and especially are realizing how interrelated and how much the supply chain links everybody. As K mentioned that as well. So we are hoping that financial flows from the private sector will start going into adaptation measures outside their very their boundaries, and in a more with collaboration with government, with civil society, and so on. What I'd like to leave you all with is this call to action. So it takes all of us to do things together. And so we invite you to be part of the SICA Alliance and join us in building this community which can share examples, that can work together, and across the region. I'm also happy to say that just watch the space, because we hope to also launch, as part of the Alliance, Nature Times Tech Challenge. And some of you here may already have innovative ideas, and this could be presented for piloting through the challenge. So with that, please do keep in touch with us. There is an expression of interest form in that QR code, along with other materials. The SICA playlist, we have done a lot of webinars showcasing also the examples that are featured in the second report. We can get access to all the reports, the 2 reports I mentioned. So we hope to welcome you into the Alliance to build a stronger Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lakshmi, for sharing your insights with us. With that, I'd like to conclude today's program. Thank you all for joining us on the second day of Malaysian Support for COP30 event. We hope you enjoyed the sessions and the discussion. Before you leave, we would be grateful if you could complete a short post-session survey. A Zoom poll will pop up on your screen. If it doesn't appear, simply click the poll icon at the top left of your screen. Do stay tuned for our upcoming sessions from November 13 to 21, where we'll continue to explore a diverse range of climate themes, which are all listed on the CGM website. Don't miss Day 3, Anchored in Resilience, taking place at the same time tomorrow. The recording of today's session will be available soon. And if you have friends or colleagues who would like to join, registrations are still open. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you.